Hey everyone, Mr. Fox here. Hope you're doing well. If you're like me, you probably were very disturbed to find that that nice new Arkham Knight game that you purchased, or maybe even pre-purchased, was a piece of garbage. And I've spent the last couple of days in my spare time, in the evenings actually, trying to figure out how to make this piece of trash work right. So, tried a few things. I'm going to share with you what's worked best for me. Hopefully they might work for you as well. So right now, this is running everything with default settings. Nothing has been modified from the NVIDIA profile, no tweaks of any kind. So I'm going to use that as a baseline to see what kind of result we get. This is actually going to be a better result than I had when I first started. The preload that I have apparently had something messed up with it. I was getting horrible frame rates, like 20 frames per second or less with both 780M and 980M SLI. I finally gave up on the system with 980M SLI and deleted the content and downloaded it over again. And that's what we're running right now. I merely downloaded it from Steam and we're running it with all defaults. This is with the newest drivers that NVIDIA released for us, the 35330. Do have GeForce Experience installed, but it is not optimized. I'm using default settings for the profile with no changes, just right from NVIDIA control panel. So it's actually fairly playable right now. Frame rate's pretty bad, as you can see. The SLI is enabled, but the secondary GPU is basically dead, not being used at all. I know all of you are running into the same thing here, so preaching to the choir. But here again, we're running this benchmark as a baseline, so I can show you the tweaks that I've tried that have worked better. So this is much better than I had the first time, as I mentioned. Both machines, the preloads were junk. I don't know whether they maybe updated the files quietly without saying anything, maybe tried to patch something without admitting that they screwed up or what, but the second download was much better. And it was done several days later. I did the preload a couple of days before launch. It does look nice, even though it's only using one GPU. The smoke and fog effects, all the paper and the rain effects are really nice. So before I deleted my installations and downloaded it over again, I had been playing with NVIDIA Inspector and I actually had SLI working quite well. The problem was severe flickering and flashing, just miserable to use, but I had both GPUs up in the high 80s and 90s on utilization with frame rates up like 110, 120 frames per second at times, with my lows in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So that was not bad, but it was just horrible to look at. It looked like garbage. So what we're going to do now is dedicate the second GPU to PhysX. Since the game is screwed up and can't use it, we might as well get something out of it. So I'm not changing anything else other than dedicating that secondary CPU to PhysX. And we're going to make sure that shader cache is turned on here in a bit too. I have my global profile set to use shader cache, but we're going to double check that in a moment. But here all I did was dedicated the secondary GPU to PhysX. Say nothing right now. I left SLI enabled. I didn't turn it to off before I enabled the secondary GPU being dedicated to PhysX. All of our graphic settings are still maxed out. don't know about you, but I don't go for that turn down the settings to make it work right. That was Rocksteady's suggestion, and I don't think so. So now we're getting a load on our secondary GPU, and we have a nice bump in the frames per second as well. Good bump in the frame rate, actually. Still dropping lower than we'd like to see it, but looks playable now. No flashing, and no artifacts or screen tearing. Note that I do not have VSync enabled. I have VSync disabled on the global settings tab, and I also have it disabled in game. So the frame rate's getting up there, or low is not terrible bad, but it's very playable, over 60 frames per second. And the only change I made was taking that totally unused secondary GPU and giving it to PhysX as a dedicated processor. You know, a lot of folks are all anti-SLI. It never works right and that kind of stuff. I hardly ever have problems with SLI, but when I do, here's a great example of where you can do something with that secondary GPU that the guys that have one can't. So it does help. It's very seldom. I can't remember the last time I've had a game that I had real SLI problems, other than a couple of game engines that are just borked, like your Wolfenstein titles. Obviously the game engine does not support it, but that's a rare exception. So that did much better. So what we're going to do is the same thing now, but we're going to turn on MFAA in NVIDIA Control Panel. I was surprised this made a nice difference. So let's have a look and see what happens. Still have the secondary GPU dedicated to PhysX. We still have SLI turned on, even though it's not being utilized as that. And we're going to turn on the shader cache, even though it's set on. Notice that it's changed to bold. I'm also setting all my settings for, I don't use adaptive performance. So let's turn on MFAA, and the shader cache, even though it said on before, when I selected on a second time, it's actually bold. So apparently, even though it said it was turned on, it may not have been. So you might want to check that. Typically being bold means that it's a change from the standard profile. So maybe NVIDIA's profile had it turned off, even though the global settings saying that it was enabled. So who knows? This thing's an abortion. So still everything maxed out. Let's see what happens here. So nice. Another decent jump, a good about 10 frames per second more. And look at our minimum, it's much higher than it was before. Secondary GPU is being used nicely now. It's a shame that SLI is still broken, but hey, as they say, better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. So I don't know if I don't have an Optimus system to test. I don't know if you can dedicate the CPU to PhysX with an Optimus system or not. Typically that doesn't have good results. We're going to take a look at that in a minute. But obviously there's clearly an advantage to having a multi-GPU system, even when SLI doesn't work because the game developer did a crappy job. We can still get a use out of that secondary GPU. So it's looking nice. Very playable. It's not the 90 or 100 frames per second I like to see that I normally do, but hey, 60 is great. Some people set VSync. Obviously, if you have 120 hertz or 144 hertz monitor, 60 is not what you're looking for, but it's a lot better than 30 or 40. By the way, I have not tweaked the INI files. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I just downloaded it, a new installation, and ran it. So you can probably get some more mileage tweaking those INI files. I did when I was tweaking before, trying to use NVIDIA Inspector. Actually, the Unreal Engine 3 or using um, Bioshock Infinite, that type of thing helps. Still doesn't fix it. I had the best results using the Unreal Engine 3. That got good GPU utilization out of both GPUs, but it was just a massively stuttering, flashing mess. So high frame rate is like up to 90s, 100, but who cares if it looks terrible? So let's have a look here with CPU. We dedicated the CPU to PhysX. See what happens. Now notice our GameWorks, some of our interactive stuff is disabled now, so that's broken using the CPU. So heads up if you have Optimus or if you have an AMD, you're not going to have those NVIDIA GameWorks features. So let's see, look at that, way up now. So the GPU is totally free to work on its own. It's doing a lot less work now because if you notice what happened to the smoke and the fog, it's like, wow, there's tons of stuff missing. So obviously it drives the frame rate up at a loss of visual quality. Still looks nice, but if you know what's not there, it's like, man, that sucks. So sorry if you got an AMD or an Optimus system and this won't work for you, but at least you'll get nice frame rates and it is smooth. But hey, you can't miss what you don't know is there, right? But let's watch this though. I could stop this, but let's continue watching because there's a lot of stuff that's just totally gone with the CPU PhysX. Now, so these tires are supposedly spinning right now, but you can't hardly see any smoke. It's a real shame. Don't see nearly as much paper and trash debris blowing around. There's some, but it's just not the same. Looks like there's fewer raindrops. There's just a lot that's missing, so you're naturally going to get that higher frame rate. GPUs aren't working nearly as hard, but they're very playable, so you might try that if you have an AMD or an Optimus-based system. So AFR1, AFR2, I tried that earlier. That typically works. I hoped it would now to make SLI work. It almost always does, but there are times when it doesn't. Let's just see what happens. It may save you the heartache of trying this. So here we go. AFR2. Well, looks like our GPUs are loading up. Maybe so. Let's see what happens. I haven't tried it yet. Okay, well this stuff got turned off somehow. So let's turn it back on. Oh, that's because we had the CPU PhysX, so that got disabled. So let's turn it back on and restart the game. I hope you guys don't mind me skipping through that very painfully long uh, cutscene or start screen, or whatever you want to call it, all the advertisements. You notice there were some white streaks, like screen tearing, that we're having going on there that we didn't have before. So yeah, GPUs are definitely both loaded, but man, 14 frames per second. Hard to believe that's even the same system. So we're not even going to bother running that any further. No point in it. So natural or logical assumption is, well, if AFR2 doesn't work, maybe AFR1 will. Often is the case. Oh, nice. Crash. I've been getting that a lot. Always on exiting the game. Thankfully, it's not during the game. So, at least not yet. I've really only been using the benchmark trying to get it to work right. I haven't even actually started the game. Wasn't worth playing the way it was. Is actually such a piece of crap that it was just useless. So it looks like we may have found a way to actually play and enjoy this game if we can ignore the fact, whoa, look at that. Lots of jerking, stuttering going on there. That sucks. That's probably not going to end well. Looks like the GPU utilization is high, just like AFR2 was. Everything's still turned on, so saw some white banded screen tearing there diagonally across the screen. I don't know if you caught that or not. Still horrible. Thanks, Rocksteady. You guys rock. Not. So we're not going to watch the slideshow anymore. So we've kind of covered the basis to do a quick review. What worked. We had secondary GPU dedicated to PhysX and MFAA turned on. We also made sure that the shader cache was turned on, even though it's set on. We selected on again, and it turned to bold text, which makes me wonder if it actually was enabled until I reselected it. And that gave us overall the best results. Not as high a frame rate as we had with CPU PhysX, but definitely nice playable frame rate with all of the eye candy turned on. Looked really good. So let's see what happens now. Make sure that our results have not changed. I don't want you to watch this video and say, hey, Mr. Fox, it didn't work. We're testing it twice, just to be sure, just like Santa Claus making a list and checking it twice. So here we go. Looks like we're still doing pretty nice. So not great. Rocksteady really sucks for releasing this, but this is much better than what I started with, and I hope you guys can put it to good use. Sorry, my voice is kind of going out. Been having some allergies. I don't know if you're able to pick that up on the video, but I apologize if you can. So our average is 61, and our minimum is still fairly decent considering that it's only one GPU being utilized for the game and one for PhysX. So I'm going to make another video shortly behind this one. I'll put up on YouTube that shows a side-by-side, like a picture-in-picture that shows with CPU PhysX and GPU PhysX, just as a dig for all the people that say PhysX is worthless or it sucks, because it clearly adds a lot of value. I'll put the link to that video in the description for this video on YouTube, so that if you want to see it, you can watch it. But there we go. Very playable. Still broken, Sorry we had to fix the mess from Rocksteady. Hopefully they'll patch it. You guys take care. Be good.